Hello, everyone, and welcome to the week ahead. This week, we are in the first light of the new moon. We are also just minutes past the opposition of Mars to Pluto, which has been building for the last couple of weeks, and was exact today, earlier in the day, or may have been last night for those of you in other time zones. And we're currently in the phase with the moon in Sagittarius, after this new moon that we just had at the 1st of November, in Scorpio. And there's quite a lot of Sagittarius planetary, activity. So we have Mercury, the moon, Pallas Athene, who's the goddess of wisdom, and Venus, all in the sign of Sagittarius. They are, they're all moving this month, as I spoke in the month ahead, to aspect Saturn and Neptune, right? Venus will square Neptune. The moon, even later today, tomorrow, um, will square Saturn, and Mercury will square Saturn as well. And Mercury is going to do its retrograde at the end of this month in the sign of Sagittarius. So when we think about that archetype in particular, it has to do with authenticity, freedom, um, truth, from an inner truth quality. An inner truth quality requires us to have emotional honesty, self-honesty, the freedom to be ourselves, trust in that our inner guidance and what is present here. And in this, next couple of days, we see also Mars, who's been in the sign of Cancer, also in its shadow. It's going to be stationing retrograde very soon here. Next couple of months will be really focusing this Mars retrograde time. Mars has been in Cancer, which is ruled by the moon. So there's this aspect of the pressure that we have felt, the pressure that we have felt to grow, the pressure that we felt to change, the pressure that we felt to overcome personal limitations and dynamics. One of the things I heard today a lot was that, there's this pressure for me to grow into something that I don't quite know I'm ready for. There's this pressure for me to become someone or something, and I'm trying to listen to my inner truth. Is this actually what's right for me? Is this what I'm supposed to be doing with my life? Is now the right time, right? Sometimes pressure happens. Pressure is instigated on our life, right? If we're liberated from a job unexpectedly, right? All of a sudden, that puts into perspective something and it changes everything, right? However, there's always an orientation we can have to that pressure. One is to trust, two is to open to that experience, open to what it is eliciting in us emotionally. And three is to relax, because in the grand scheme of things, resisting the pressure that's on our lives or that's in the world is ultimately not going to serve us. You know, it's interesting. This comes to me from a birth affirmation. And when you're going into labor, you are going to have that baby. There is going to be immense pressure. Trusting your body and your capacity, opening to what's happening and letting it come through you, and relaxing are the best possible things that you can do. And from a soul perspective and from an evolutionary perspective, we're all in a great rebirth, right? This is a ancestral rebirth in a way because of this Pluto and Capricorn coming to its last degree, finishing up a cycle. And Mars is the leading edge of that evolution, which is pushing us to use our will to change. I've been facing, so much challenge in my life this last week. And a part of what has been really helped me has been this invitation to bring all of my emotions, the good, the bad, the ugly, to God, to bring them all and to give them up. Like, and I mean, give them up, not as in like, don't have them anymore, but to like actually let myself feel the anger, the frustration, the fear, the scared little person inside, to let myself face and name and share and reveal these feelings as a means, as a way of them just like opening to and letting them go. And we have this beautiful opening light of the moon cycle, which is inviting us through Sagittarius into really being in touch with our personal path. And yet the ruler of Sagittarius right now, Jupiter, who rules Sagittarius, is in Gemini, opposite Venus. And so there might be a sense of like duality or duplicity in what we know to be true, right? Things can be true and not true at the same time. I heard this recently and it resonated. Like, it can be true that you love someone and, not true that it's the right relationship. Or it can be true that you feel a calling to do something, but not true that it's the right time to do that. Or vice versa, you might have a calling to do something, but in your mind think that, oh, this might not be the right time for me to do this. And that may be coming from fear. It might be coming from a sense of um, conditioning from the past. We have to really stay in touch with how often we're self-referencing the past to determine what we believe about the present and or the future. And so a lot of our fear can come from that place of like, I'm looking at the past, I'm looking what's happened before, I'm looking at where I was hurt, where I was wounded, right? Venus is trine Chiron. I'm looking at those wounds that I carry and how I believe that they're going to happen again. They're going to recreate themselves in this situation or that situation, or they're coming up because I'm faced with this choice to grow and to evolve. And yet I have to remember what the bottom line is. What is our bottom line in evolution? It is to return to love. It is to know ourselves, know the truth of ourselves. It is to follow our soul's path, and the journey that path is our journey, right? And each and every one of us is going to have unique experience and a unique soul calling, and we are all so much very the same, right? And so many of you I know resonate with what I speak about because this is true. This is true what we go through things. And as these polarities, of course, with Mars, and I'll probably, when I get a chance, make a whole video on the Mars retrograde cycle, um, because we get a very unique thing with this Mars Pluto opposition. We had the very first one today, then Mars will go into Leo. So Mars enters Leo tomorrow. Mars will progress into Leo and station retrograde and go back, oppose Pluto a second time, station direct, and then oppose Pluto a third time. And these oppositions are each initiating a various different phase of this cycle of change that we're in relative to Mars. Mars in Leo is very different than Mars in Cancer. Mars in Cancer says, we're emotionally vulnerable young little children. We have all these feelings, like, right? It's the little boy that has like so much anger, but really underneath he just is hurt, right? It is the part of us that is like a champion for, um, the vulnerability and has to have the courage, though, to face that vulnerability in order to overcome the feeling of being disempowered. Mars in Leo is identified with our special purpose, what we are here for, who we are meant to be, right? Why were you uniquely created by God? Why? And then the will, of course, the will is our way to create what we're here to create. We are creative beings. We were here to create. We were created by a creator that created it all. And then we are here to create. And that creative actualization is the way that we discover a specialness, not from a perspective of narcissism, but from the unique truth of individuality that exists in every single soul, that also is the unique creative essence of every single soul, right? And that is so beautiful for each and every one of us to discover, to learn about. We have a fire, we have a drive, we have a desire. We would consider ourselves depressed if there's no desire to create, right? If we also use that desire to create um, in a way that is hurtful and harmful, we become identified with a specialness that entitles us to hurt others. This is, a misuse of this power, right? This power. We want to use all of our creative power for good in the world. And this week we have a really interesting week ahead. We have election day in the United States. I know not everyone here is watching from the US, but those of you who are watching from the US are watching the US. Um, you know, the presidential elections will happen on this day. I don't necessarily think that they will be determined on this day. I think that it might be a process of resolution to get to clarity, but we'll see. And what's so interesting to me about this particular day is that we have a Capricorn moon, which has to do with the government, the structures, the people, squaring the nodal axis. And that Capricorn moon in that square, the moon is the skip step. It's the emotional body that has to evolve. Um, it is ruled, or it is resolving to the ruled south node in Libra, which is ruled by Venus. And Venus is in Sagittarius, opposite this Jupiter, right? So what has to evolve in our lives often will take a level of self-responsibility that requires us to have personal freedom, personal choice, personal authenticity. In opposition to a overexpanded polarity of dualities, ideas, propaganda, differences of opinions, judgments, all these things. And I heard someone say this morning, like, no matter who is elected, we will have to pray that the world, that God intervenes in the world to bring about a more loving world. If we want to bring about a more loving world, right, it's not necessarily going to be on the leadership in government to bring about a more loving world. It will be about the people in their lives, in their creative lives, in their home lives, in their family lives, in their spiritual lives, in their relationships. And Libra, the South Node in Libra in particular, has to do with our relationship to the past. It has to do with our needs and the way that we help and care for and please others, but also how we love and care for and find balance and peace and harmony. And there's nothing more powerful that we could wish or pray for than peace in the world, right? Than resolution of these dynamics where we seem to think that there are like two sides or two ideals or two a right and a wrong, right? We think there's a right and a wrong. And I know for myself, the place where I have most humbled myself is the places where I think I'm right. I'm so, so right. And in reality, I'm so wrong. And so I've come to learn that, like, we don't always know. And that quick instinctual desire to know comes from a desire to control. It comes from a desire to feel safe and secure. It's not to make that desire wrong, but we have to really put into perspective where that can become judgment of other people, where that can become feeling alienated and not belonging, even in the places where we belong most. It can lead to breakdowns in relationships where two people are, butting heads because they're both identified with being right. Someone has to set the sword down first. Someone has to say, I prioritize my peace over my power, not my power to be disempowered, but my power to remain attached to a perspective of control or rightness that leaves me feeling separate. Because all these ways in which we can become identified with feeling separate are the ways in which we can become identified with being alone, being weak, being oppressed, being hurt, being victimized, you know. And we are stronger than that. I think a lot of us will realize our true strength. I know I have definitely realized my true strength, not in those moments when I'm resting and there's money in the bank and everything is going well and my relationships feel good and, I have all the things I need. I have realized my true strength when I am like knees to the ground, snotty nose crying, help, asking for help because all the shit in my life is not the way that I would want it to be. Things are melting down, relationships are hurt. I'm struggling, my physically my body is not well or whatever, or that whatever it is. Whatever situation we find ourselves in, that place of our pain is the place where we meet the most strength within our souls. That is, again, I'm going to keep referencing this idea of evolutionary necessity because I think it's a relevant to this whole dynamic of change where we're often in, you know, w wishing it was easier, wishing it could be different, as opposed to really accepting that this is what is, and yet giving ourselves the chance to recognize that there is a different way. Things can change. We can grow. We can evolve. And one of the things I heard this week was Mel Robbins on a podcast talking about her new book, The Let Them Theory. And you know, she says, let them be judgmental, let them have an opinion, let them be angry, let them be, let them, and then let me. And I love this idea of like, let me, which allows you to be empowered in your choice around who and what you are and what you're choosing to do with your life force and energy, whether that's setting boundaries, whether that's practicing self-care, whether that's deepening into your own personal spiritual practice, your relationship with God, whether that is becoming creative in your life and like letting yourself go and do the thing and try the thing that you've been afraid to try. You have the power to reclaim your power, even in the face of a collective where that power may seem to be oppressed. And then after the election, we start to move towards Capricorn moon conjunct Pluto. So the moon conjoins with Ceres, the mother goddess, first, and then The next day we have a Pluto conjunction and then a Mars opposition when the moon comes into um, Aquarius. And I always think of the moon as the forerunner. So the moon is the fastest moving planet body in the sky. And when she is coming through spaces and places, right, she's bringing us a precursor invitation into the energetic or the emotional body that is being catalyzed or will be catalyzed. So these are times when I pay attention, like moon opposite Mars. Mars is in Leo. We know that Mars is eventually going to oppose Pluto in Aquarius in those early degrees, 0 degrees, 1 degrees, so we can see here, this is a time when that intensity and that polarity between the Aquarian collective and the individual ideal, the individual self-will, the individual creative purpose, and the collective will seem to be at odds, right? They will seem to be, and we have these planets in fixed signs, right? The sun is also in Scorpio. Um, Juno, the goddess of marriage and commitment, makes a T-square here in Scorpio. And I think she's really asking us to double down on our commitment to the deeper work in the face of what might be really trigger. And one of the things I observed within myself this week was like, oh, I'm really triggered. Like there's a lot more that I need to do in order to meet that triggered, highly emotional state. And if I'm moving too fast, if I'm burning out, if I'm not eating right, if I'm not resting, if I'm not taking time for myself, if I'm not sleeping well, all of those things kind of combine to make the sort of like trigger happiness, but it doesn't take much, but a deeper commitment to actually looking at the shadow of that. And underneath the shadow of any of our triggers is actually the power of where we desire to change most deeply. And our capacity to commit to that power is really where we can invest our energy. In really looking at that, realize like, oh yeah, man, every time I get triggered, every time I feel like agitated or, angry or afraid or hurt, um, it reminds me of the part of myself that wants to be more gentle, more kind, more loving. It reminds me of the deep desire I have to be more accepting, to be more patient, to be able to listen, more deeply. It reminds me of all those things. And I'm just trying to reach down in there to that place that is that so that I can stay anchored in that in the face of things that seem, you know, like, of course, anyone can be like we can be thrown off all the time, and things can happen suddenly and unexpectedly that it's like, wow, that that hurt. I wasn't expecting that. And then how do I deal with, the emotional reaction or the catharsis that comes with that? And then we have the first quarter moon, which it is a fixed moon in this case, and if you set intentions at the new moon time, right, we start to see the building of energy towards the first quarter moon. And this is where the Saturn work, of course, comes in, right? Anything that we desire, any change that we desire, requires long-term commitment to a practice, to some way. And that's what is shaping us into the people that we're being. We could call it habits. We could call it daily rhythms. We could call it ways of being or ways of thinking or, whatever you want to call it. But it is that Saturn quality that cultivates our skill, our discipline, not in a bad way, but actually in a good way, where we have a greater sense of freedom and confidence, where we have more of a root within ourselves. It's like if we want to be strong, we have to do strength training. If we want to be emotionally resilient, we have to practice feeling our emotions and coming back to ourselves. If we want to be less triggered and angry, we have to keep coming back to those emotional patterns and parts of us, especially the ones from childhood, which felt unexpressed then and need that expression now, need that honesty now, need that holding now in order to be released. And if we want to be forgiven, we need to practice forgiving, right? We need to be able and be willing and fearless in loving people and letting things go. It won't matter, it won't matter when they've died, when we've died. It won't matter. We think it matters now, so we hold on to the past. We think that it protects us now, so we hold on to the past. We think that it keeps us safe, so we hold on to the wound. We hold on to the hurt. We hold on to the pain. We think that there isn't a way to let it go, that it's too much pain, that if we face that pain, that it'll never go away. But the reality is that if you turn your back on the wave, it will hit you. You're going to get wet. If you dive into the wave, you're less likely to be plummeted and, taken under. You're less likely to drown or be overtaken by the grief. And it is through that choice of Saturn work, the discipline of um, having a daily practice, having a way in which we're cultivating a relationship to the deeper parts of ourselves, to our own honesty, to our own vulnerability, to our own creative life, to, you know, all things in that way that ultimately gives us the freedom to be who we are, not who others want us to be, not who we've been avoiding being, not who we, but who we are. And being who we are um, is, exactly what we're here to be, right? It's like that's the bottom line. So I think I think it's a powerful week ahead. We also then have Venus entering the sign of Capricorn on Monday. Um, she is moving pretty quickly through signs right now, so she's going to be doing this last round of her being in Capricorn, though, is really the last time in our lifetime that she'll be in Capricorn with Pluto in Capricorn. And they, in fact, won't conjunct in the sign of Capricorn. Their conjunction, they made a conjunction in Capricorn last year around this time. Their conjunction will be in the sign of Aquarius. So we can call this a balsamic phase of Venus and Capricorn. And it's really important to keep in mind with the balsamic phases. Um, I'll read you a little bit from the balsamic phase. This is the balsamic phase between Venus and Pluto. If you want to learn more about the Venus-Pluto transit, including their conjunction, which will be in early December, I made a video introduction to my class series Love Evolution, which is on my channel, and you can watch that intro. It'll give you the whole overview of the transit. This phase correlates to an evolutionary need to bring to completion the entire cycle so that a brand new evolutionary cycle can begin. All unfinished or incomplete business, patterns, or stages of development will be recreated so that necessary culmination can take place. Recreated. And imagine, think about it this way. You have a relationship, something's not working in the relationship, you end the relationship, you get into another relationship, you recreate the same relationship, right? Why? Because none of the other stuff from the first relationship was cleared. And so then those pieces of unresolved dynamics that were within your soul had nothing to do with the other person, get played out again, right? You become the responsible one when the cycle comes to completion and you're asking yourself, well, what can I do to change this, right? Um, what it says here about Venus and Capricorn. The Venus and Capricorn person has learned to be very cautious and controlled in how they express themselves and relate to other people. This external relatedness pattern is reflected in how they learn to inwardly relate to themselves. They have deep feelings and needs that take time to surface into conscious awareness. And even when they do, these individuals require time, Saturn things, to feel secure as to what they're feeling or needing is correct. Even then, they can be very slow to relate or communicate feelings and or needs to others. The pre-existing fear has occurred because these individuals have experienced rejection and a wrong judgment all too often early in their life from one or both biological parents. So we're talking about early childhood conditioning where we had feelings, where we were told not to stop it, to be quiet, to not do, where we had impulses, we had desires, we had things that we dreamed of doing, and we were told, name the paraphrase of blah blah blah, that just got embedded, like, little ones especially, they embed. And then we grow up with that sort of operating as this baseline structure where now we have this real opportunity to forgive those patterns. We have this real opportunity to recognize how those things got lodged inside of ourselves, and rebuild the structure, reparent ourselves, or reconnect with our own inner sense of authority, inner truth, inner guidance. Inner guidance will be especially important here in this time, as opposed to external validation. External validation is always going to have on some level, unless it's coming from someone with unconditional love 101 as their bottom line, who's just like loving you no matter what you choose to do. Most external validation is going to come with some kind of judgment of what they think you should do or what they think is best or what they went through or whatever. And that's because we're human and we're trying to like make meaning and have relatedness. But the inner sense is what's most important. And getting to the truth of that inner sense may actually be a slower process than we would like, right? It's like when you don't have clarity. I know I've gone through these periods in my life where I just could not get clarity around what to do with something. And I have learned that I just have to sit with it until it comes. And it doesn't always come when I want it to come. I would much rather be out of the discomfort of waiting to know what is the right thing to do, or even the internal avoidance of the discomfort, maybe of what I do know, but I don't want to acknowledge, or whatever it is, right? But we get in this week, especially, the opportunity to dissolve our beliefs about things, to question our, belief systems and the core conditioning that has created those systems and held them in place for so long, and really, come to ask the divine, like, God, what is your plan for me? What am I to do? What is my inner guidance saying that, when you feel it, you just know, and if you don't know yet, that's okay. It's okay because the knowing is coming. And Venus, of course, in this week, next week will square the nodes following them that moon. So let's pay attention to that. I'll touch on it in our week ahead next week. Um, but just it's a very powerful momentum that we're building in the month of November. If you haven't had a chance to listen to the month ahead, I go through, there's quite a lot of change and transformation. It's really the month of rebirth in this whole year that we've been walking through. And 11/11, I'm sure it, a powerful day for us to really root into a sense of where we dream about going in our lives that we have been unable to go because of the internal blocks and limitations that have been there, where we have been caught up in resistance or hurt from the past, that we are actually ready and able and capable and willing to fearlessly release, because to be free of these things is to move ourselves forward in a way towards the deeper desires of our soul, which is ultimately to love and to be loved. And just like the message I received in this last ceremony, um, if your only desire is to love and be loved, it will always be fulfilled. So, my friends, that's our week ahead. I hope that these messages are helpful to you. As always, if there's something that touched your heart, please leave it in the comments. Let me know how you're doing, or give me a little flower emoji or something. Um, just love your presence here. So grateful for you. If you're new to this channel, subscribe. On my website, Astrology with Michelle, I am booking final readings for the month of November, and then I will be going into a fallow period for December. And after November, readings will not be available until 2025. So if you want to book a reading with me and you've been waiting to do so, please go ahead and book something on my calendar. I'd love to connect with you, tune into how this year is going to be wrapping up and what is coming new in the new year. And I will be, um, yeah, I'll be sending out information on an upcoming class series that will be available through the winter time for study, and then we'll start with a live um, class participation in January, which will really help you to ground in the fundamentals, the basics of astrology as I teach it and as I see it. Um, it's called Foundations of Astrology. I'll also be introducing a level 2 for those who are more advanced and want to practice with multiple charts. And I just love you guys so much. So grateful for you to be here. As always, my prayer is that love be filling your life and that healing be happening in all ways, always. So bye for now.